I remember when we were doing the identification for this project, and I came for the first time to Purevihir province in Cambodia, and I was truly stunned. It's a very remote area in Cambodia. There were no roads, essentially, so it was very hard to get around. And it was a reconciliation area, which means that for about 30 years or so, there was really very, very little contact from this province with the central government. So there was really no infrastructure, no formal government mechanisms for providing service delivery of education, of health, and also where communities were highly suspicious of central government involvement, and that had been used to being very isolated. Also, because it was a post-conflict area, landmines were a huge problem. They were still trying to figure out where the landmines were. And also remember on this first trip, following this caravan of cars that were from the local counterparts that were sponsoring us, and they kept telling us, oh, look, that bridge has been blown up, that bridge has been blown up. So it was really, really difficult. You could see the devastation both in terms of the physical infrastructure, but also the legacy of seeing a very large number of people that had that were handicapped, that were missing limbs, that had deep scars. So you could really see what the legacy of the conflict was. As we were preparing the project, I kept thinking, where are we going to start? It seems so overwhelming, and at the same time, there was so much to do that also, I felt this is a place where we can really make a difference, and you could also feel the hunger for change amongst the communities. And you could feel that the environment was ready to really begin to start a new era and to really provide new opportunities for children. This Purevihir province has a large ethnic minority population of Khoi and Lao people, and again, as we were moving around, there was not a lot of service providers, and there was not a lot of NGOs active in this area at the time. So
you're talking 2003, right?
Around, yes. And so what was striking too is that every time either the local partner, NGO partner that was the implementing agency, which was Save the Children Norway, was out in the field, they kept discovering all of these hidden communities that were in the jungle and invisible to the official numbers of population, and so the project did an amazing job in terms of reaching out to these communities, of carrying across a message about the importance of education, and also of how communities could come together to begin to provide services. And even though we had a very explicit program of trying to build schools and to provide formal education, the project did a tremendous job in terms of really setting up what they called at the time mini schools. And these mini schools were just local, using local materials to really set up a space for children to come, and also usually it came paired up with cultural centers, which was again a space where the community could bring artifacts that were meaningful to the community, or to again their ethnic minority languages being spoken. So they would bring they would make records of the local language, or they were trying to translate sort of the official curriculum, the official materials into sort of local language materials. So all of that was done in a way to sort of convey the importance of education, and then secondly to really sort of say these services are not here brought to you, but rather are yours for you to develop and for you to service your community. So the project in that sense was an extension of a community aim, and supported sort of a process that was led by the community to really sort of come up with interventions that were suitable and that were designed by local communities themselves. And I think that was what the magic that really made possible to work in these very, very difficult circumstances. This JSDF actually was a successor JSDF to a previous JSDF that was done in another reconciliation area in Cambodia. So there were a lot of lessons learned from there. So we were lucky in that sense of being able to build from past experiences. The implementing agency was the same implementing agency, and we were able to draw from people that had participated in this past project to sort of really bring lessons learned and to really sort of act as local facilitators that were truly local. There were people from the provinces around Peravi here to say, okay, we've done this and it worked. Look, you know, we were able sort of to turn around and being able to provide services that were meaningful and made a difference to our children, and this is how we did it. So in that sense, I think that we were much of the sort of tremendous impact that could be observed in 2 years, which is a very, very short implementation period, really was contingent on the fact that we could build on that past experience. I also think that the implementing agency did a very, very careful job in terms of working with government to really sort of at the provincial level and at the district level, sort of to build a culture where they were support agents of what was going on in the communities, right? And sort of coming every so often and say, you know, this or that, and provide and also sort of a really sort of a service-oriented culture of saying, like, we're trying to sort of really figure out how to serve your needs. And if you tell us what your needs are, we will work with you to try to figure out a way to help improve service delivery. And through that process of dialogue, through that process of really understanding what the realities were on the ground, trust was built. And that was sort of a motivating factor to really sort of create the demand for education services and to really sort of see how quickly enrollment rates just jumped by 20 percentage points in just a very, very brief amount of time. I have tremendous respect for Save the Children Norway in the sense that they weren't an implementing agency. I think they were an empowering agency. They facilitated the dialogue between government and local communities. And they were able to sort of, in all honesty, I think at the time, the bureaucratic structures were very feeble. And also they didn't have the means to provide adequate supervision. They didn't have sort of a lot of experience in terms of setting up systems by which information could flow back and forth and for decision making. And they didn't have sort of support mechanisms to say, well, how can we, given that we don't have teachers, and given that recruiting of teachers is so difficult for these areas because people did not want to move into sort of localities where there really was no basic infrastructure. I think that the NGO was extremely capable in being able to say, okay, we can recruit local teachers, we can help them develop basic skills, we can provide the support that's needed, and also we can create a dialogue by which the district office or the provincial office has a deeper understanding of what the issues are and then being able to address those issues. So through that process of dialogue, really sort of both empowered communities and empowered the district office and created sort of an enabling environment by which that could happen. I think that in the absence of that, in the absence of the NGO as a facilitator, would have been a lot more difficult. But the key to success was that from day one, there was pretty much an exit strategy. That this was not an NGO-driven program, but rather was a facilitated program. There was very little demand for education. The isolated communities, the very poor, so parents in that sense had to be convinced that schools were a credible entity, that they weren't coming in to change their ways, and then secondly that the education had to be relevant to their needs. And so the approach of the project was to really sort of work with the community as to like where they wanted the school to be. Secondly, to sort of not come right away with a large new infrastructure project that would plop a school down, but rather say, okay, we'll start with a mini school. We start with bringing kids together. The school doesn't have to be, in that sense, can be an informal institution of a place where people can come together. And then also doing a lot of work in terms of saying, like, well, this is an education that's relevant to you. How? Because the teachers are coming from your community and represent you and your reality. Because the curriculum was constructed around sort of the providing life skills and really addressing sort of how to better use sort of local facilities to get sort of, you know, attend to either their livelihoods, to sort of grow food, to in some schools, for example, they had pig raising skills or aquaculture sort of skills. The approach was one that sought to empower children in the sense of giving them the tools to face life, and also children are very independent at a very young age. There's a long distances to get to school, terrain that's very difficult, the weather conditions are difficult. So it was an approach of schooling as empowerment, and that meant, for example, promoting peer-to-peer learning groups, that the older kids would help teach the younger kids, that there were sort of homework clubs where, again, sort of the more able kids, the kids that were a little bit more advanced in the curriculum, would help the weaker students. And it was also an approach to say that the teacher is a facilitator of knowledge, and that the community is also a facilitator of knowledge. So like a lot of the curriculum was a lot of work was done to sort of work in the local language and then transition to Khmer, and also to really utilize the local reality as an entry point for learning, sort of about the local plants and animals, about sort of the local weather conditions, about the challenges of transportation in the local area, and so on and so forth, in a way to address sort of their daily lives and to make it relevant to their daily lives, while at the same time sort of incorporating the usual curricular guidelines that the Kingdom of Cambodia has. Many of the successes of the project are also directly related to the commitment of families, of very poor families, to making schools work. So the teachers oftentimes did not have housing. You know, if they were not from the community, they had nowhere to. So the community would provide a place for them to live, would provide also, you know, like formal teacher salaries in Cambodia are very low. So they would support the teachers with local rice, with local food, so that then and also really sort of when teachers were not from the community, to really sort of work with teachers, and lots of stories of how these teachers were made honorary members of their community, were really welcomed and were really supported, and a real appreciation of what it took for them to come and to help them set up these learning centers.